Let me make sure I have the right one here.
A ton of people speaking on this.
Yeah. All right. All right. Actually, yeah, this is the one I need. No, it's not. But that's okay. All right. So HB 79 came to us as a bill to restrict the ability of the commissioner to inspect apples and require that if he inspected any apples, he pay for them. And the commissioner testified that the section of statute that was being addressed was not actually the section of statute that currently is used to give the authority to inspect produce, and that the relevant, so produce is now inspected under FSMA, which is a federal program, and that there was a separate chapter which gave the authority to inspect produce under FSMA, and the commissioner also indicated that the chapter in question, and I just find my copy. I just need to grab a copy of the bill to.
No.
No? Oh, sorry?
I'm kidding you. No, he's kidding you. I'm kidding you.
All right.
I'm kidding.
The commissioner indicated that Chapter 434 has a lot of sections in it that are not currently being used because their purposes are now covered by the FSMA inspections. And the FSMA inspections are performed under an authority that's available in RSA 436. And as a committee, we decided that it would make more sense to, rather than just ITL the bill, we could use this bill as a vehicle for creating a study committee to look at both chapters 434 and 426 and remove language that is, or look for language that can be removed from those chapters, and to make sure that the chapters are consistent with each other and that there are no conflicts or unnecessary duplications. So that's what our committee thought, and we hope that you'll share that thought.
Thank you for your testimony, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, I have nobody else to speak on it. I'm going to close the hearing. Is there a motion to move into exec? So moved. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, let's take up HB 79.
I move out to pass.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All in favor of passing HB 79?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. It passes. Senator Pearl.
I knew you were going to ask me to take it out.
Yeah,
Sure.
all right. Congratulations, Representative. You did an amazing job.
I'd like to move consent. Oh, we can't.
Can't do consent. Yeah.
Senator Raymond, is it okay with Senator?
I'll let him
Chair
take him
if we
out. Just
exec without her here, or would you? I mean, this is kind of inconsequential, but I just thought.
Yeah,
She
I
gonna
just,
be here, or-
We can reconsider if she comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah, if she comes in.
We can.
yeah.
All right, all right.
Motion to move out of exec.
So move.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I just wanted to give him a bird in the hand.
No, I agree. I just see, oh, wait a minute.
All right, so you got a few minutes.
Do you have a second?
Sure.
Okay, so, the back.
All right, so for the record, I'm Representative Peter Bixby from Dover, representing Stratford 13, and also the ranking member of House A&E. And HB 152 is the result of a study committee last term looking at RSA Chapter 431 on soil conditioners. I sponsored the study committee bill last term because I've been involved with a couple of bills that referenced it and noticed that there were some potential problems with it. We met several times, and with testimonies from the department and other stakeholders, we identified several issues that needed to be addressed. This bill addresses the nuts and bolts issues. Another bill that you will probably be seeing, I think it's been retained, so you'll probably be seeing it next year, deals on the way that revenue is handled, and another bill will be dealing, that you'll also probably be seeing, will deal with the data processing issues that we were told about. So Director Wyman was very helpful in explaining a lot about how labeling and definitions are used in the how a lot of the labeling and definitions used in the chapter are drawn from recommendations from the Association of American Plant Food Control Officers, APFCO, a national organization that creates model definitions and rules to encourage consistent regulation of plant food materials in all states. While many of the definitions remained consistent with APFCO recommendations, the chapter title, Soil Conditioners, does not have a standard definition and is also not defined in the chapter. The way this term is used in the field is not consistent with what this chapter governs. Our first recommendation was to retitle the chapter Soil and Plant Additives and provide a definition of this term at the outset of the chapter. We wanted the term to encompass both what the chapter currently governs and also similar substances that might be added to law in the future. Another issue we had identified related to the tonnage reports that fertilizer manufacturers and distributors need to file twice per year. There is a penalty for failing to file or submit the fee payment. However, the penalty is outdated and so small that it is ineffective. The amendment allows the the bill allows the commissioner to set this penalty in rules. The next issue has to do with penalties when a producer sells a product that does not match the label description referred to as a deficiency. These penalties are paid to the customer who has been shortchanged, but current law says that the remedy is only available to customers who have bought more than a ton. We felt that all customers should be able to receive a remedy when they have been cheated, so we have removed that that threshold of a ton, so it's now anybody who gets cheated can be recompensed. There is also an issue with how the penalty would be calculated. Current law has a cumbersome mechanism for determining the value based on a survey of producers and publishing the value in an annual report. This mechanism is time-consuming, and the resulted value is often outdated by the time the report is published. We determined that the fairest and quickest method of determining the value was to use the actual invoiced price. The final issue this bill deals with is a paragraph that should have been written with a sunset clause but wasn't. When a statute dealing with turf fertilizer standards was passed in 2013, the sale of fertilizers that exceeded specific percentages of nutrients was banned for use on turf. However, we did not want to penalize retailers who might have some stock on their shelves, so we exempted existing stock. 9 years later, one would expect that stock to be long gone. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Senator Pearl with a question.
Thank you, Representative. My first question is related to the removing of the 1 ton purchase. The commissioner is okay with this? I mean, this is going to be a real headache for him if every bag of fertilizer that someone buys, they're coming in and looking for a 5 or 7 cent deficiency.
The commissioner and the director gave no objection to that. And you can, the director is here if you wish to ask him about that, but I'm not going to put words in his mouth.
All right. But there was no testimony in opposition to
No testimony in opposition to that.
Okay.
Further questions? Director, want to talk about it?
We remain agnostic on that. I mean, it's not our call as to how you want to treat the citizenry. It's our job just to make it happen.
Okay.
So, that was my thought.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll have to see how it pans out, really.
The director liked it.
Would you like to come up and testify about it at all? Yeah, we'll have him, just so we can have it on the record, if that's okay. Yeah. And I'll recognize Senator Pearl.
Good morning, Director. Thank you for coming in. Just for the record, I used to be in the fertilizer distribution business, and I foresee a major headache for you in the department if you take this all the way down to every single bag of fertilizer that's sold. I think the reasoning for having 1 ton on the record was so that you were eliminating some of the very small claims that could be made, because you could be literally looking at a 5 or a 10 cent penalty that you're paying out on a bag of fertilizer and processing if there's a deficiency. It doesn't matter to me, honestly, I don't care, but I just want you to, maybe the department wants to think about that a little bit before we completely change this. I think you're opening up and creating a situation for yourself where you're gonna have a lot of work on a very, very small gain to the customer. So just my thoughts on it.
I don't disagree. On this one, I remained agnostic, as I didn't think it was my place as an executive branch employee to comment on what might be wrong or right, but we do have some discretionary authority as to what we do and do not sample as well. But your point is taken, and I don't disagree.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Director, appreciate it. And I don't have anybody here wanting to speak up on it. Anybody in the crowd want to speak up on this? Seeing none, we're going to close the hearing on HB 52. One more time?
Good. You like this, or?
I don't know. Do you want to exec this now? I'm slowing down.
I think we need, I personally
Want
think that's gonna create a headache for the department.
to?
I think we need to talk to the commissioner first to make sure they understand
All right.
the ramifications.
Okay.
I would not, if you wanted to amend that, I don't have any objections to that.
If you want to amend it, we could amend it, and just to keep it as with the 1 ton.
I certainly understand. Should we go into exec before we discuss?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'll move exec.
Second. By Senator Britzel.
Yes.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, seeing none?
I'm not I understand the intent of what the committee was trying to do with the bill. I just really foresee a major headache for the department in ever meeting this task, because I mean, there's a lot of tons of fertilizer sold through the retail stores where there's a customer that buys a bag or 2 or 3, and if they feel they've been aggrieved, I just think that's really gonna put a lot of work on the department. That's my concern. I mean, I guess I would be amenable to maybe lowering it from the 1 ton. I mean, this whole program is really meant for the agricultural producers who are buying large lots of fertilizer. We buy, 30 to 50 ton a year, and you sample them typically. And I just don't want to create a headache for the department. That's my real concern with it.
So, and of course, they do have discretionary as to what they sample from what he said.
What's a reasonable sample, do you think?
I mean, the ton, I'm not aware of any complaints that there was ever any concern with the below 1 ton level, but if we wanted to even go to a half a ton, I don't care. That would at least keep it more to a commercial level.
All right, let's put it at a half a ton. We'll make it.
Kind of split the difference.
How do you want to write it for Nick?
So, line 23, Nick, where we've crossed out provided that the purchase is of 1 ton or more. If we reinstated that and made it 1/2 ton or more, that would kind of split the difference between the two. And that would open it to a smaller customer, because there are times that we only buy a half a ton of a certain product sometimes if it's a specialty crop. So I'd be agreeable to that.
All in favor of the committee amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Been seconded or moved?
Oh, yeah.
I'll move, I guess I'll move the committee amendment.
Second.
All in favor of the committee amendment?
Aye. I'll
Any
move,
opposed? Seeing none.
I'll move
Nick, you want
pass
to
as
just read
amended.
that back to me real quick?
So the crossed-out part will now be reinstated on line 23, and it says provided that the purchase is of 1/2 ton or more.
that's good.
All in favor of the bill as amended?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll take this one out too, if you want, unless you want to put it on consent. I'll take it out anyway.
Move consent.
Consent?
Second.
All in favor of consent?
Aye.
Any opposed? And Senator Pearl will take it out.
Nick, can you read that back? I had the wrong bill in front of me.
So on line 23,
Yep.
in the crossed-out part, that will be reinstated, and it will be provided that the purchase is of 1/2 ton or more.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to move out of executive?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, seeing none. And we still have 3 minutes. Representative Bixby, you're just batting 1,000 today.
You got it, man.
So, yeah, good with that. You move your amendment.
Yeah, these were really challenging.
Propose these changes that they're ready. Double check with Chris. Just make sure they're good.
Yeah, ED&A, there was several that didn't. Right?
If you, I don't know if you are.
I don't remember, but there was a.
No, I just,
Yeah, there wasn't many.
I think everybody, absolutely. Yeah,
That's the word.
Yes.
I asked them if they would do that.
There was no problem at all. Yeah, that was one of them that represented.
It's like 5 years too late, but so what?
You been boiling any sap lately? Have you been boiling any sap over the weekend?
Yeah, I've actually, I pulled my tap this weekend.
Did you?
They were starting to slow down, and I already have, I've got 3 gallons boiled down so far, and I've got, I have to just do the final boil. So I am down to about like, 3 gallons, so probably reduced to 3/4 gallon.
Oh, yeah.
So it's now stable, but I just didn't have time to finish it yesterday, so.
There you go.
So, I'll have
Awesome.
of gallons for the year, which is pretty good.
We didn't get,
Out of 8 taps.
we didn't get a huge run yesterday either.
But the RO really helps.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't go back.
Do you use the, that blue piping now, or do you use the buckets?
No, everything's on pipeline.
Mic's on?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Barbara Comtois from Senate representing Barnstead and Alton. Thank you. So this bill arose out of farms being, some noise ordinances in communities that would not allow farmers to perform their duties, their agricultural duties, because of the noise ordinance times. In my town, just last Saturday, they were trying to put in a noise ordinance where you couldn't have any activity before 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning and after 11 p.m. at night. Now, for those of you in agriculture, that probably wouldn't work. And in the noise ordinance, it said farming exemptions, farming would be exempt based on state and federal regulations. Currently, we defer to local noise ordinances for agriculture. And this bill, again, didn't arise out of my town because I had no idea that it was going to be so onerous. But because a woman whose rooster was crowing at the wrong time of day and had tried to insulate her coop, had put shades in her coop to try and squelch the noise. But someone in the town, in government, did not like the rooster crowing. Another thing that was brought to light over the summer was someone had an apple orchard and they needed to spray after 9 o'clock at night, because when you're spraying pesticides, you have to do it when there's no wind drift or when the bees aren't around. So you have to be, so really it's beneficial to their neighbors, but because the tractor started up at an hour that wasn't reason in their noise ordinance, they filed complaints. This is going on all over the state, especially with the influx of people we're having that do not understand agricultural activities. I can tell you that I've had to start up my tractor at midnight for a birthing calf, or if there's a tree down on a fence at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're going to go out and use your chainsaw to get that fence up and running so that the animals don't get out. Farming is 24/7. It's not, you can't set hours for agricultural activities. I also include in this, and I do not exempt agritourism from this bill, and I think there's going to be someone speaking against to exempt agritourism. But one must understand that agritourism is already regulated, and it's a means of attracting visitors to the working farm. And it cannot be the main purpose of the farm. The farm has to have the main goal, and this is an accessory to the farm. So people are saying, well, weddings, or music. Well, we have a very short season in summer where that would probably maybe affect people because someone might be having a wedding after 10 o'clock at night and the band may be playing. But we also heard in testimony that if you go and ask your neighbor, say, hey, if you want to continue to do this, keep the decibel down. Most people are, anyone in the agriculture community is probably going to comply with their neighbors. Good neighbors helps the farmers, trust me. So I am urging you to pass this bill. I will also push up here, give you a copy of Upton and Hatfield, which talks about the local regulation of agritourism and agriculture, and how it really already is regulated and that we do not need an exemption for that. And I'm open to any questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I have a couple questions about RSA 2134A.
Okay.
Now, as you know, it's a rather broad and comprehensive section in terms of what it includes as an agricultural activity. Let me start by noting that in there, it says that an agricultural activity actually also includes off-site farmers markets. So that the bill as written would mean that if there's a farmer's market somewhere in a downtown or wherever, that the community can no longer enforce any ordinances on it. So is that something that you think, says it's in 2134A, do you think that's appropriate?
So I'm just going to say this. Farmers markets are welcomed by the community. And I know in our town, sometimes we have farmers markets and people want to hear the bands playing. Sometimes we have bands, sometimes we don't. But I don't think but it's not, the farmers market is ancillary to the farm. It is not the primary use of the farm. And when you look at agritourism and the definition, let me just read
Excuse
this.
me if I may.
Well-
This is not under the agritourism section.
Okay.
That section of 2134A is not under the agritourism section. It's in another section there that says that it includes markets that are not on the farm site, so that you're also exempting any regulations from that activity, which may be miles from the farm.
But the Farmers Market Association would have to agree to that, and that would be not one farmer. It would have to be the entire association or the members of that farmers market. And I don't think that any conglomerate or people are going to do something that would adversely affect them or their neighbors. We have to trust people.
One would hope. May I ask another question? So let me get back to the agritourism section if I could. So I worked, I think it took us almost 3 years, Senator Booton and I and others, to get agritourism passed. That was a study, then an informal summer study, then 2 bills. And it's a good thing we did it. I think agritourism was really important to do at the time, and we wrote a bill that had certain provisions in it that allowed certain kinds of town ordinance regulations to continue, kind of as a condition of getting the bill passed, but also made good common sense. So I guess what I'm concerned about here is that, we have a letter from Nate Grays of the Municipal Association say, hey, look, you can do all this. This is all taken care of. That anything that's a farm activity that's essential to the agricultural purposes is not, is permitted under existing 674-32C2. So I'm just really concerned that good neighbors asking people quietly and so on, but what this does is it says that there's no longer, this bill says no longer any enforceable noise ordinance on an ancillary activity, no matter what time of day or night. And so could you address those concerns?
So, sure. So let's just talk about agritourism. Agritourism is an accessory use to the farm, and an accessory use has been defined as one which is dependent on or pertaining to the permitted principal use. It subordinates the use of the property occasioned by the main use and incident to it rather than principal use of itself. I know for a fact that when I held fundraisers or Festival of Trees, people would not want to leave they would stay out. We'd have caroling and things like that, and the proceeds would be donated to the local communities. So someone could complain that would, if we exclude agritourism altogether, that would not be permitted. Because the complaint, in my mind, wouldn't be maybe not the singing or the caroling, but they could say, well, the cars are leaving and they're making too much noise. I mean, all you have to have is one person complain. We find this in agriculture all the time with in a lot of different areas. Agriculture is constantly under attack. Constantly. Farmers work 24/7 to maintain their properties and to keep the open land. We want to preserve our rural heritage, and if we don't do everything we can to do that, we will not have it any longer.
I'm all for the farmers. That's why I did ancillary and everything else. But I think that this, I'm concerned about this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? On the Pearl.
Well, I'm thinking, so I'm trying to take in what Senator Waters' concerns are and certainly the intent of the bill. And I think on the agritourism side, Senator, I think that 2134A is very specific about that these have to be on-site events. So,
Yeah, that's
So you-
good, but,
in,
you know, the Noise ordinance is not being enforceable anymore at all.
well, I guess what I would say, from at least from most of my experiences, with any agritourism events, is that, and I don't know if the representative would agree, but most of these things would be wrapping up by 10 o'clock at night anyway, because the farmer themselves want to go to bed. Most of
is
us
true.
aren't late night people. But I do understand your concern, and I'm trying to read through and understand it from your perspective as well. And I did also receive the letter from Mr. Grays. But I think the intent, Representative, that you have here of this bill is to try and make sure that the farms are able to do the functions that they need to, whatever time of the day it is. And I certainly know on my own farm, you probably won't see me at 11 at night, but you'll certainly see me at 3 in the morning. That's more of my time, but.
Right, and with these noise ordinances, it would prevent that. And and as you know, with spraying pesticides, it's not between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m.
No, I
Or
would
10 a.m.
agree completely. I'm usually done by 7 a.m. because the wind starts up.
But, and then during off-season, usually farmers are so busy in the summer, they don't have time to do anything with, that would really cause a problem. Wintertime is more of our downtime when we try and have more activities on the farm that's ancillary to that farm just to make ends meet. I know, like I said, at our farm, we used to hold a Festival of Trees, and we'd have sleigh rides and caroling and marshmallow toasting. And then there's other people in our town that they do full moon walks at night, or they have people going and staying overnight, and they might be out by a campfire singing or something. Usually, an agriculture activity on a farm is not that close to your neighbors, so it'd have to be really, really loud to really affecting people. But all it does is take one person to shut it down, and not an entire community if we don't put something in place.
Further discussion? Senator Schulman?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. I have also been at town meetings and where the noise of farms, I live up the street from one, and the surprise of people who move in and find that farms make noise and the animals make noise is always a jolt. But that said, there is a certain amount of, like, you chose to live next to a farm, which comes with some noise. It seems that this legislation would take out local towns' abilities to do their own ordinances to support their farm. Like, this is something that we discuss in Stratham all the time, like literally all the time. We can't stop talking about it.
Well, thank you for the question. But the town that I live in, we're an agricultural town, and what we have found is and we're also a vacation town because we're at the start of the Lakes region. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden we have people moving in to retire, and it's like, well, we don't want to be, this is the hours that we only want to hear noise. And I get that local noise ordinance is needed for some of the activities that are going on in our town. But if someone moves in next to a farm or in a rural community, these are the same people that want to eat fresh food, have fresh produce, have, meat raised naturally, and yet they're some of the first people to complain about the noise. And we have to be concerned that we can do everything for our farms, not only to help them maintain the open land, but also for food security in this state. I mean, and I'm sure Senator Pearl could speak to this, but I believe we can only feed 6% of our population with the farms that we have in state. That's a pretty scary number to know that the rest of our food is on the road, and we're dependent on it coming across state. Mm-hmm. So if we don't do everything we can to help farmers, that number will go down. We need to increase food security and people to farm instead of decreasing it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm reading you the report that came from the committee in the House. And was there any discussion about taking away what the, how this affects local control over, with town ordinances and their own ideas about noise regulations? Yeah, but how did that play out?
So thank you for the question. There were some people were concerned, but as I just stated, in my town, they put in a noise ordinance. Well, they were trying to put through a noise ordinance. It didn't pass this time, but it will be coming back. And they said farming activities will be exempt based on state and federal laws. There are no state and federal laws regulating noise ordinances for farms. So therefore, we would be subject to whatever noise ordinance they put in for everybody. And we also know that in certain towns, because depending on, sometimes it's a personality thing, or you cross somebody the wrong way and they'll start complaining about a rooster crowing at the wrong hour of the day. I mean, the person had the rooster long before the noise ordinance, and now you want the rooster to go away. And we know that I have heard, and I can't swear to it, but I got it from a reliable source, that there is actually a suit because of a noise ordinance in agriculture. So, like I said, we have to do everything we can to protect our agricultural roots.
Further questions? Excuse me, Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You just said there's nothing in state statute about noise ordinance, and I would just point you to 674-32C2, which not only covers this, but also ensures that any noise or anything that's necessary to a farm operation may not be prohibited by local ordinance. So that is in statute, so I just wanted to make that correction. There is state statute on it.
Okay, and that is 674?
674-32C2.
Okay, thank you for that, Senator Waters. But over the summer, when we were looking at things and looking for statutes, because everyone thought under the right to farm it would exempt all of the noise ordinances, we were coming up against a wall. So I don't think it's very clear, and even municipalities were having a hard time finding something. So I think it really needs to be spelled out in 2134A.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, what was that RSA again?
I'll read it again. RSA 674:32-C2 reads in part, nothing in the subdivision or in RSA 674-32B shall exempt new, established, or expanded agricultural operations or activities from generally applicable building and site requirements such as dimensional standards, setbacks, driveway and traffic regulations, parking regulations, noise, odor, or vibration restrictions, or sign regulations. And here's the key. Provided, however, that in circumstances where their literal application would effectively prohibit an agricultural use or an activity allowed by this subdivision, or would otherwise be unreasonable in the context of an agricultural use activity in accordance with the provisions of 672(1)(3)B, the Board of Adjustment, Building Court of Appeals, or other applicable local board after due notice and hearing shall grant a waiver from such requirements to the extent necessary to permit the agricultural use or activity, and so on and so forth. And in other words, if you've got the 2 a.m. spraying, you can do your 2 a.m. spraying. So I don't know. I mean, I agree in principle. We want to make sure the farms operate, but I think that by saying everything in 2134A is now not covered by any local ordinance on these things is too broad a brush. That's all. So I just wanted to point you to that. There's the language. And maybe it's not perfect, but there it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Senator, but I do really believe that this is absolutely needed, and it is needed in RSA 2134, where it's fully stated and everyone can see it.
Further questions? Seeing none? Oh, wait, Senator Birdsell, she snuck in. Last second.
So looking at 674:32C, if that's the case, why do you think towns would be submitting, passing ordinances on noise, including the agricultural?
Could you repeat that, please, Senator?
Looking at the language in 674:32C, where it does say that the noise ordinances are protected for agriculture. If that's the case, then why are towns passing ordinances regulating the noise if they don't have the authority to?
Currently, the state gives gives authority to the local, to the towns to pass noise ordinances. And even though it may be in here, and like I said, because it's in a separate section of law and not under agriculture, and trust me, I asked people about this and had people looking for me over the summer. They could find certain things, but nothing concrete. And we really felt that this needs to be spelled out so that everybody understands it. Not, like I said, this is about agriculture. It's about our roots. And we really need to put it out there where it belongs in this section.
Thank you.
So Representative, I'm gonna, and Senator Waters, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but in my reading of 674:32C2, it authorizes the town to make these ordinances for noise and smell and vibration and all other things, but it provides a mechanism where a farm can go in before the board and get a waiver. Am I understanding that correctly? Is that the way you're reading it?
Yeah, if necessary, I mean, if the town would know this and maybe not enforce, but, you know, this language I think we put here when we did the ancillary activities legislation with Senator Booton, to ensure that there was a process. And I think that what makes this necessary to do it just the way it was done in statute is that 2134A is so darn broad. You mentioned, and there are other things I didn't go into, that if you look at the whole definition and you're saying no longer any ordinance can apply to it, you just, it's a thicket. So anyways, I mean, we can discuss it in executive.
Certainly, but Representative, so I'll follow up. So it's my understanding, if my reading of 674:32C is correct, it establishes that the town can make an ordinance and that there's a process where a farm can be exempted from it. And your idea here is to say that there's no noise ordinance that can be enforced upon a farm on any of its activities as defined in 2134. Am I understanding correctly what the bill is doing?
Yes, and to further the point is, here it's saying you have to go before the town and ask for an exemption.
Right.
Okay? We don't have that much time in our lives to go before the town. And if you have a town official, as this one person did, who was the town manager that was complaining about the rooster, do you think she's going to get the exemption? Because it's a funny thing when you leave it up to town officials when they base things on personalities or who they like and who they dislike. It's unfortunate that they're not just looking at the law, but they're looking at personalities and what's good for them personally. And that is why I think this is absolutely required.
But would you agree that probably more of a major concern would not so much be the person with the rooster, but perhaps the timing of an application of an herbicide or a pesticide on a crop, where you didn't necessarily have the 2 months it would take to go through the process of getting an exemption?
Oh, absolutely. Well, as you know, I mean, we're constantly monitoring the weather, and it's like, gee, I want to go out and spray. Well, no, I can't because it might rain tomorrow, and oh, gee, it's going to be windy, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And we can't be out with the bees. So, yeah, it's a science.
Okay, I'm all set.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Representative Bixby?
Yes. I'm afraid I'm one shy on copies of this, so
You give it to our Ezra.
So, one of the things that, for the record, Representative Peter Bixby from Dover, and one of the things that came up in our committee in our discussions of this was the complications that agritourism presented, and we attempted an amendment which didn't succeed and which I think was not actually quite ideal. After it was, after there was really a chance to act on it effectively, one of our other members noticed that in RSA 672:1(3), there is language that is related to zoning and agriculture that says, provided I don't have that quite in front of me, but the basic language is provided that the agricultural activities and agritourism as defined in RSA 2134 shall not unreasonably be unreasonably limited by the use of noise ordinances or unreasonable interpretation of such ordinances. I've modified it for noise, but the idea is that in 672, the language is that zoning shall not unreasonably limit agricultural activity, including agritourism. And I think that it makes sense to adapt that language and put it into chapter for towns, chapter 31, which is the chapter that basically lays out how towns can structure their ordinances, and also in chapter 47, which is the equivalent chapter for cities. So and because my guess is particularly with towns, when a town is looking to figure out what they can do in terms of writing ordinances, the place they're going to really look is chapter 31. And chapter 31 says towns can make noise ordinances. And if there were if there were language there saying towns can make noise ordinances, but they cannot unreasonably limit agriculture and agritourism, that would still give them the leeway to make any ordinances they need to, as long as it falls within the idea of reasonableness. And certainly it is reasonable to allow a spraying operation. It is reasonable to allow a wedding that doesn't go until all hours of the night. It's not, but it is also reasonable to say, well, if you're going to have a wedding on your property, it needs to end, the noise from it needs to end by a certain time. So I think that reasonable criterion exists in the zoning law, and it can be transferred to the noise ordinances, and that would provide a very clear signal for any town that's considering this that they can make an ordinance as long as it falls within the realms of reasonableness.
Questions from the committee? I have a question. As far as reasonable and unreasonable, I mean, that can still get dicey. I mean, couldn't it fall under personality conflicts? When the rooster crows at the break of dawn.
Right. So there is a certain that reasonableness is one can say that reasonableness is a very arbitrary standard, but in fact, it does exist as a standard in a number of our laws already. And it is something that, should these things come to court, the court also has methods of dealing with reasonableness. Which is, and I think that, but I think my primary thought here is that there is already in statute a precedent for using that reasonableness standard for this purpose. And if we just transfer it to the purpose of noise as well as the purpose of zoning, that allows for more leeway on the part of the towns for zoning, but also provides a protection for farms.
You have a question? Any further questions? Thank you, Representative. I have nobody else.
Oh, actually, I had one other thought, which is that I think that the bill as it is coming to you will not survive, will not reach the point of being signed by the governor. And I'm hoping that if it is amended the way I'm suggesting, that it has a better chance of that happening.
Okay.
I know that we're talking about another body there, but I think it's something that also needs to be taken into consideration.
One never knows. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Anybody else want to talk on this? Going once, going twice. Closing the hearing on HB 252. And that's the last bill we're going to be hearing for today, so is there a motion to move into exec? So moved. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I'd like to take up 54. And we have a number of amendments for SB 54. But
For the purposes of discussion, we'll move Senator Avard's motion on amendment. Oh, I guess we're gonna.
Is there a motion on HB 54?
Let me move on to pass on SB 54.
And discussion.
If there's a second.
Yep, Senator Bertzel.
Then I'd like to move on Senator Avard's amendment 1048S.
Thank you, Senator. And discussion, and I know that the department is here, and Chris, would you mind helping us kind of go through this just for the public's understanding on what we're trying to do here with this bill? And I know Senator Waters has a couple of suggestions, and we'd like to see if that will float that by you as well.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Chris Elms. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Energy. I'm joined here by Dan Phelan, who manages regional electric issues for the department. Dan's last name is spelled P-H-E-L-A-N. So Dan will run through the bill. He's the smart guy here, and he'll be able to explain details in certainly in greater detail. But just to give you a little bit of a preamble, this amendment has a clear mission, and that's to incentivize new resources in a technology-neutral way, and it's focused on 3 core goals, and those are, addressing challenges related to the cost of electricity, price stability, and winter reliability. And the department has spent a lot of time and effort to help craft language that we could be comfortable with. Just to give you a little background, we have, historically had discomfort with power purchase agreement legislation, and we, in light of a number of challenges, I won't get into the whole thing, but and the desire of stakeholders, policymakers, legislators to move forward with something to address those core challenges soon, we've worked hard to come with this language. We are comfortable with this amendment. I think if this were to substantively change or be expanded beyond this, the department would be certainly less comfortable. But Dan can walk through the provisions that has certainly changed quite a bit from what the bill was as introduced. So, okay, continue, Dan. Sure. So
If you want to put the microphone towards you a little bit, Dan, thank you.
So I'll walk through the bill as the amendment as has been brought forward. First, we start off with our legislative findings and purpose, and this is something that we at the department think is very important because we want this to be focused and not creep beyond the areas that we've identified. So the primary motivation here is that the cost of electricity has experienced a significant price shock, mostly due to international situations. In New England, the price of electricity is extremely linked to the price of natural gas, and that product has gone crazy with increased demand from different sources, mostly in Europe. So the findings set that out, and we identify that the development of reliable sources of low-cost electricity supply is critical to stabilizing those prices, which is beneficial for New Hampshire's ratepayers and businesses. Therefore, we are taking this action to find new sources of energy that are reliable and deliver the cost effectiveness that we so desire. So then we go through the power purchase agreement section. This is section 2, allowing the electric distribution utilities to issue proposals for power purchase agreements up to 2 million megawatt hours, which is roughly 20% of New Hampshire's state load. We have limited that to new resources because we think the system needs new electrons. And this is not an effort to bail out bad bets or sign up for the last few years of a facility that is on its way out. But this is an effort to develop new cost-effective resources for the state of New Hampshire. Contracts will not be longer than 20 years in length. That's a pretty standard PPA length, but we don't want resources that live out their life and are still on the books for New Hampshire ratepayers. Let's see, I've addressed new, I've addressed the quantity, and then we have timeline issues. We think it's very important that an action occurs quickly and is responsive to the challenges that we see now. We don't want this to sort of be hanging out there and waiting for somebody to come forward if the market conditions change and it's no longer responsible to enter into a power purchase agreement. So no later than June 30th of 2025 is when the utilities can issue, and they cannot enter an agreement after June 30th of 2026. That gives time for the approval process to occur and everybody to have their say in the stakeholder process. So the distribution utilities can bring forward the contracts to the Public Utilities Commission, where there will be appropriate hearing within 90 days to find whether or not the contract appears to meet our objectives, and those objectives are in section 3, which is on page 3. So, of course, one of the most important ones is that the agreement is cost effective over its term. The second part here is that it supports electric energy resources that are expected to be available during long duration winter cold events. So part of what we've seen is a significant price spikes associated with winter. This develops because New England is linked to natural gas, but not linked to significant natural gas pipelines. So when the prices get extremely high, when load gets extremely high, the gas in the pipeline goes to heating utilities before it goes to electric generation utilities. So what is left over is available at very high prices and in minimal quantities. Then the region switches to primarily oil resources or imported liquefied natural gas, which is very expensive and subject to the global market conditions that we have seen over the past year. So the use of these contracts should be for those times and to select resources that can provide incremental benefit to the system during those hours. We then go to price stability and reducing risk to market volatility. Another clear objective of this, supporting diversification of New Hampshire's electric resources, which is also a way of limiting price volatility and price shocks by simply diversifying the kinds of resources and the price of resources available to the market, and then any other factors necessary to determine it's in the public interest. So those will be the characteristics that the Public Utilities Commission will look at. The department, and we will have discussion about the Office of Consumer Advocate as well, will provide input on what the RFP looks like, what the characteristics the distribution utilities bring forward in that process will be, and then it will receive the full adjudication before the Public Utilities Commission. And I think that is a summary of the bill.
Great, and if I could have Senator Waters, you want to talk a little bit about maybe just amending my amendment a little bit and just tweaking it for, and Nick, we're going to be adding this to the language.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And let me ask just a couple of questions that will clarify some things, and I'll go into the suggestions that we've had discussions about. So one question's come up. Would you, just kind of give some sense of your feeling about what incremental, how much is incremental?
So incremental is new ability under new construction, according to our language. The quantity is whatever the new construction brings about. So if it's an existing resources that adds a new turbine or otherwise increases its ability to generate, then that incremental piece would be eligible for this contract.
So if I just may follow up, so it could even double the capacity of an existing plant and still be incremental?
It could, and then subject to whatever processes it needs to get into the ISO New England energy markets.
And if I may just follow up on that too, is that, we had some discussion about potential project that might take an existing generation facility and transform it into hydrogen, for example. And that would maybe fall under this as potentially new and okay as a potential development?
Our understanding is not to have refueling be an incremental source, because that is not a new source of electricity.
Okay. All right. Well, that's an
Although to
interesting
the
question.
extent that the capacity of that facility is increased, that increase would be incremental.
So I understood.
And another a question too. We've had a lot of discussion about hydro, and Chris, you've indicated you feel that under this bill, that increases in hydro capacity would be allowed.
Yeah, to the extent that increased production is a result of new construction under this definition, that would fall under the incremental definition.
And thirdly, just again on the definitional stuff people have been asking about, that I had questions about storage, because it seems to me that one of the easiest and quickest things we can do to deal with the winter and the price spikes in gas is to have some more storage capacity. And you believe that under this bill, storage, we've kind of waffled in law as storage generation or not generation, right? We passed that bill that says, it's not new generation, anyways, but nonetheless, it's you see it as storage capacity is something that would be included under this bill.
Our reading of this bill would be that storage would be included. It is specifically that new electric energy sources are eligible, so it doesn't specify that it be.
So now I'll get the additions. All right.
Let's do some doctoring here.
So as we had discussed on line 25, and the issue here is whether on page 1, line 25 of the amendment, the issue here about whether we could open this up to include the possibility of having partnerships with out-of-state utilities. And I brought this up particularly because the governor was at a briefing for the 6 governors about potentially offshore wind procurement contracts being done among the states, which might be the very best way to ensure those resources come in equitably. So what I was going to do was add this phrase that there or with out-of-state utilities, subject to consultation with the Department of Energy and Office of Consumer Advocate with resulting contracts approved by the Public Utilities Commission. And that's the language we discussed, and it would go here.
Yeah, and I will say that that's something we're open to. Obviously, it is it's a complexity, so we'll see if utilities actually take us up on that. But yeah, I think we're comfortable with it. We would have to go back to our lawyers, but I think we're good with
And
that
then
language.
if we do it there, we'd also do it on page 2 of the amendment, on line 10.
And the only thing I would raise there is that currently under Senator Avard's amendment, that part of the process doesn't have a consultation by the department or the consumer advocate. I don't think it's necessary to add it there if you only wanted to make it clear that
So
out-of-state
you
utilities.
suggest there just strike New Hampshire?
I think that would do it.
Okay, that will take care of that one. All right.
So,
We'll go over this again, okay? I just want in public have the kind of things that we have agreed to. And then another place, you mentioned the Office of Consumer Advocate already in your remarks, and what we would do is on line 29, where it reads, electric distribution utilities shall consult with the Department of Energy, and then and the Office of the Consumer Advocate.
on what page?
On page 1, line 29, electric distribution utilities shall consult with the Department of Energy, then add, and the Office of the Consumer Advocate.
That's fine with us if it's okay
And
with
then
him.
A couple of lines later, on line 31, it says the department and the Office of the Consumer Advocate will provide. So we're good on that. And again, Nick, I will make sure that gets repeated.
Chris, you all right with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then on page 3, on line 14, we're going to add there this phrase, into the wholesale market, and then in a manner to minimize costs and maximize benefits to ratepayers.
And we're okay with that.
Okay? So we can go over this again, but I just, wanted to have the dialogue with them.
Page 3, line 14?
Yeah, page 3, line 14, where it says, into the wholesale market in a manner to minimize costs and maximize benefits to ratepayers. So,
Representative Bose, you see that?
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Further questions?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While we're in the throes of this, I think it's really important that in that draft RFP area, that before it goes for review, that there be public comment, so that if there are any barriers that might be in the way that those proposals could be adapted before the RFP is issued, could we get that extra little bit of review time and collaboration?
Yeah, and I'll let Dan jump in here a little bit, but what I'll say to that is, the utilities are the ones putting out these RFPs, and nothing prevents them from going out for public comment on that. Our process of the consultation and what the department or the OCA's role there would be in, I think we have a provision here to hire sort of expert consultants and, bring that expertise to bear in making sure that what goes out as an RFP actually aligns with the statute and what those expectations would be. From our perspective, we're not sure that the department is the right venue to foster sort of that public comment. But again, nothing prevents the utilities from having a public participation in the RFP process.
Sure, and really the best role for the public is going to be when that contract comes forward and people are able to see the details of what the ratepayers may be signing up for. So that process will occur in front of the PUC with the department as presumably an intervener and many others. There, the public will have a better understanding of what exactly is being brought forward.
May I follow up? Yeah, thank you. So there's nothing preventing them, but there's also nothing compelling them. And wouldn't it make more sense before we get all the way down the road to the RFP being now under review by the PUC to have that extra step so that the public is able to participate before it gets too far down the road.
Again,
But
that's,
I mean, it could be in your purview, like actually.
yeah, no, I certainly appreciate the question. I
Yeah.
think, that given that this is enabling for the utilities and that this is something that they may or may not undertake, if you wanted to have that be something that they look at, that's fine by us. We just don't think necessarily the department would be the right host for that public comment.
So a may rather than a shall would be
So,
would be acceptable to adding to that process?
this language as it is right now, the putting out of the RFP is a may for the utilities.
Mm-hmm.
So that right there is in and of itself an option, and they have that option to go out for public comment as this language stands.
And I think.
Where is that?
I think as it is right now, and knowing, and hearing what you're saying, they may do it all anyway as it is, and I don't want to overcomplicate this thing. We came from a very complicated discussion, if you will, and we've done a lot of work on this. So I just I want to make sure, and I'm glad Representative Vose is here, Chair of, just looking at this as well, and we want to keep this as simple as possible so that it has some great support in the House. So if we can, I think if they're already allowed to do that, I don't want to undermine the process, if you will, and jeopardize what we have here, if that's a possibility. I don't know if that.
No, that makes sense to me. I think we think public, participation in the process is important. We think this language as it stands has adequate public participation, and
we definitely want that, but there's nothing that prevents that from happening. Right.
Correct. That's our understanding.
Further questions?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So back to that question, where is it? Because I'm new to reading this today. So where is that space where the public has an opportunity to comment, so that if there are barriers that could be addressed before the RFP is complete, the RFP application is complete, it can, we're not putting up barriers for these new energy distributors.
So I think where it's in it is that it is not precluded. So there is no provision of this that prevents the distribution utilities from bringing the comments before the public. Yes, there is also none that directs them to do so. But if it is included as a may, that's effectively the same as it's currently written.
And again, we think that that there's a really good opportunity for the public to weigh in a way where I think the public would have a lot of feelings that they would understand what was happening, that they would know what they were commenting on in the resulting PUC adjudication of the contracts that would result.
Oh, follow up.
Oh.
I understand, and that's in place. What I'm asking for is there an appetite, because this, as you read it, is silent on there being an opportunity, but so there's, it's silent, but it doesn't mean anybody's necessarily going to do it. There doesn't seem to be an incentive, nor does there seem to be any, it's not spelled out like, maybe you could do this. Now, if it's a may, they don't have to, but if it's itemized and it's not silent anymore, then it creates the opportunity.
And I think
So-
we'd be comfortable with a may, certainly.
So be comfortable with putting in, may require the draft RFP be put out for public comment.
Would you be suggesting
Page
that
2,
in-
line 1 and 2, at the end of lines 2,
in your new section 4?
in the amendment 1048, page 2, that draft RFPs may be put out for public comment. Yeah?
That's fine.
Would everybody on the committee be amenable to that?
Do you think the governor
Why
will
not?
sign it?
Well, I don't want to prognosticate on, you know, I'm not speaking for the governor's office. I think it's one of those things that, you know, the may exists as it is in the language, so we are comfortable with that being added to this language.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Licata? Yeah, thank you, Chris. I see Mike Licata from Eversource here.
Sorry, if I just provide a brief input, just on the language there. So, given some of the experience that we have in other jurisdictions, where we have done power purchase agreements and RFPs, what we found is issuing the draft of the RFP, you get back a bunch of red lines from many different stakeholders. Many of them are in conflict with one another. And so we're not opposed to soliciting public input on the development of the RFP. And I guess that would be the language that we would suggest. So not requiring that the RFP language itself is issued. What we've done is essentially like a questionnaire of the key topics and points that are in the RFP. So that way we can sort of catalog those and it informs the development of the RFP. Does that, hopefully I'm making sense, but when you release the draft RFP language itself, what you get back is not as usable as a more broader solicitation of public input. And that is how we have conducted these in other jurisdictions.
Senator Bertzel has a question, and I'll recognize you, Senator Waters.
thank you for taking my question. Is this a practice that the utilities typically do anyway?
This is a practice that at least 2 of the utilities in the state of New Hampshire have done on other solicitations. Other RFPs, the solicitation of public comment.
Thank you.
Senator Waters?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Chairman, excuse me. I was thinking about Chairman Chair, Senator Bertzel.
All right.
May I suggest this on page 2, on line 2?
You're on the current amendment,
Yes.
Line 2, page 2.
1048, page 2,
48, yep.
that we would add after review period.
Mm-hmm.
Within this period, the department may solicit public comment.
No, because the department doesn't do it.
You want the utilities may?
That would be fine with
Okay,
us.
all right. Within this, I misread it because I was reading something else. So within this period, the utilities may solicit public comment. So if that means you want to put out criteria, you can put them out for public comment. You want to put out a draft, you can put it out for public comment.
Yep.
But it's your call. And I think you'd be real smart to do it.
Yeah, I think that language covers the concern.
Is that good with you, Senator Altshuler?
Yeah, I could do that. That gets,
That would be on line 2 on page 2.
Yeah, so within this period,
You get that, Nick?
period, the utilities, or should I say utility, or utilities it should be, there may be several together, may solicit public comment.
Senator Bertzel?
So during this process, in line 2, is the RFP already, the language honed in and ready to go at this point, or are you still getting input from the stakeholders?
So our thought reading this is that we would develop an initial draft for consultation with which would be shared with the DOE and now the OCA as a starting point, which would obviously based upon the statute. And then, you know, at some point in that process, we would solicit public comment, probably in a manner that I suggested, sort of putting out the key questions. And that would inform the finalization of the RFP, which would be issued.
Okay, and you're okay with,
To the Public Utilities Commission at that point.
No, the RFP gets issued,
Excuse me,
then we receive back responses, and the response, any contracts that result from the responses would get filed with the Public Utilities Commission for approval.
and you're okay with this?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Excellent.
All right. Further discussion? All right, let's
Yes,
review.
please.
What?
I,
Oh, another thing? Okay, go ahead.
yes, please. So on page 2, line 26, I put a little asterisk because I have that in a previous draft of another amendment. And, hold on a second, it's in orange. So how, electric distribution utilities shall recover any prudently incurred costs related to complying with this section through distribution rates. And so how does that work? So would it, are we setting up a whole new series of stranded costs?
Well, that is the danger of a bad contract, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
May I follow up
So,
on that
yeah.
question, just to-
please.
That's a point that, you know, some people have had some concerns about, as I mentioned earlier, but it's one of the reasons why the addition of that language about minimize costs and maximize benefits, I think kind of is a way of
Addressing the
referencing back to that. So I
stranded costs,
didn't think
okay.
we needed to change this, but that it raised, I mean, and this is what the Public Utilities Commission is supposed to do anytime, all the time anyways, but having it explicit in this bill that says, hey, for this process too, minimize costs, maximize benefits. And
Okay.
that helps with the prudent. I mean, prudence is an important word here for
Yes,
the POC. So,
I
yeah.
spent a great deal of
so
time
I
with
don't know if
Mr.
that's
Elliott,
adequate,
learning all
Senator
about
Offshore,
that.
But that's how
Okay.
that phrase came about that was added.
I see. So that covers potentially
The whole shebang.
potentially starting a whole new series of stranded costs. So will those costs be recovered? Where are my notes? Through the energy rates, like default services, or are they recovered in some other space that I don't understand?
It is intended to be a non-bypassable charge, meaning that it is not limited to default service, and that the cost of these contracts will be recovered from all distribution customers. Section Roman 4, which is on page 3, talks about how the utilities may sell the purchase power into the wholesale market and then credit ratepayers with the difference between what the market revenues are and the contract price.
Thank you. Could tell me where that was again on page 3?
So page 3, Roman 4, line 11.
Roman 4.
Line 11.
Okay.
Which is where we're adding that phrase about minimize costs and maximize
Right.
benefits.
I see. Okay.
You got all that,
Thank
Nick?
you for your indulgence and your explanation. I appreciate that.
Any further discussion? Let's review this before we vote on it, okay? So, we have on page 1, you want to read back what you have for me on page 1?
Yes, so on page 1, line 2, after review, I have within this period, the utilities may solicit public comment.
That's page 2.
Oh, sorry. On page 1, I have line 25. I'm gonna have to get the rest of it.
Yeah, I'll read it to you, okay? Or with out-of-state utilities,
What line?
this is on line 25,
Right.
okay? So where it says New Hampshire utility or utilities, it would be comma, then or with out-of-state utilities, subject to consultation with the Department of Energy and Office of Consumer Advocate, with resulting contracts approved by the Public Utilities Commission. You good?
Good, all right.
Then on line 29, we are adding consult with the Department of Energy and the Office of the Consumer Advocate. Get that? Then on line 31, towards the end, the department and the Office of the Consumer Advocate. Get that? Okay. Then on page 2, on line 2, within this period, the utilities may solicit public comment. We good? On line 9, page 2, line 9, at the end, cross out New Hampshire. Then on page 3, line 14, into the wholesale market, and then adding in a manner to minimize costs and maximize benefits to ratepayers.
Got that, Representative Vose? All right, because we want to make sure that you're on board with us.
Kumbaya, my
So-
colleague.
That last bit, May?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So that last bit, to minimize costs and maximize benefits, that essentially gives the PUC the parameters? Yeah, thank you.
Which is, as I said, is basically that's their guideline in state statute over all kinds of energy, but just to have it explicit here for the purpose of these contracts.
All in favor for the changes to the amendment?
Move the committee amendment?
Yes. All in favor of amending the committee amendment?
Well, I think it's a move in the committee amendment.
Moving, didn't we move the committee amendment?
I'm not sure we did.
No,
We opened discussion
I'll move the committee
Amendment. Oh, the committee amendment. Is there a motion to move the committee amendment?
I'll move it.
Is there a
Second.
Senator Waters was seconded. Further discussion? I just want to thank everybody involved here. Chris and the department, Kirsten from BIA, Mike from Eversource, and a host of other individuals that put their input into
Great work.
helping this come together. Great bipartisanship. We're trying to get something solved. Josh Elliott, of course, thank you. You know, I don't want to leave anybody out, but we want to thank everybody for being part of this. It seemed like an undaunting task in the beginning, and it looks like we've got something that we can work with, and hopefully we can send it over to the House with our blessing. So, yeah, I'm doing that right now. So with all that discussion, all in favor of the committee amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there a motion to move as the bill as amended? Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there a second?
Let's talk. Do you think, it's your bill, Mr. Chairman, but this might be, do you think, well, consent is fine, but what do you want to do? We don't have to talk about it.
I'd say move it to consent. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All right, I'm second consent.
All in favor of consent?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none?
And Mr. Chairman, thank you. Good work.
I'll take this one. Yeah.
Good work.
Nominating.
All right.
Good work, Mr. Chairman.
Good work, committee. And, the thing is, iron sharpens iron, and when we first addressed it, I had no idea where it was going to go, to be honest with you. But thank you for your
Here
hard
we
work
are.
as well.
Oh, goodness.
I know, yeah. So, 62? Did we lose? Yeah, you're gonna lose me in 4 minutes, so. 62, this was landowner liability. This was originally mine, I guess. And there's an amendment here. This is Senator Altshuler's amendment, Senator Fenton's amendment. No, is it, do I have yours? No, that's not yours. So whoever put this folder together. Is there a motion on the bill? The bill clarifies landowner liability provisions relative to hazardous waste cleanup fund, updates references to terms of hazardous waste material and hazardous substance. Bill request from the Department of Environmental Services.
I'll move up past it.
Okay, hang on. So there is,
Everybody was for it. See the committee report.
is there, did anybody second this?
I'll second.
Discussion. As introduced. This is it.
Was there anyone that was opposed?
Nope, nobody.
Nobody was opposed to it. So I don't know why we waited on it, so that's, I thought somebody wanted to amend it at one point, but I don't recall getting anything. Yeah, so all in favor of ought to pass?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none? That's okay.
So we can put it on consent.
Yeah, so we, 62, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? See none, okay.
I move consent.
I'll second.
Seconded by Senator Waters. All in favor of consent?
Aye.
We'll take it out. And what's the last one here we have here, Nick?
165.
I am. This was Senator Perkins Coker's, I think? Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we were waiting for before. Senator Perkins Coker has an amendment. And amend the bill by replacing sections 1 and 2 with the following: Public Utilities Online Energy Data Platform. I had nobody against this at all either.
I'll move.
The bill?
I'll move the bill out to pass 165.
And Amendment 0694S.
I will move amendment, that amendment, yes.
Discussion. All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I will move consent.
Is there a motion to move the bill as
Oh,
amended?
I'll move as amended.
Okay. Waters, Pearl, discussion. All in favor of the bill as amended?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, consent.
So moved.
Pearl, Berto, and consent. And
I'll be glad to take
all,
it out.
yeah,
Oh,
and
so-
Senator
I'm
Waters
sorry.
will take it out.
Aye, all in favor.
Yeah.
I'm in favor.
Motion to move out of executive. We did, didn't we? Yeah. I gotta,
Vaguely.
I gotta go.
That was the last Senate bill.
Right. All in favor of moving out of consent? Out of, out of consent, out of executive. I gotta strand this one.
I thought I was the one up late
No,
last
no.
night. Instead of Rayhart.
Well done, guys.
We did it, gang. Senate bills are history. Woo!